it's a very simple thing, but I would do this every day. I would really kind of, after different practices and things, I would kind of come back to, I don't know about tomorrow. I can't know about tomorrow. And I don't need to know about tomorrow.
Every now and then in my life, there are things that happen that feel almost preordained. The kind of perfect fit that feels so obvious that it feels almost unremarkable. Like, of course this happened. It had to. It was just meant to be. That's how I feel about this week's episode with Riyaz. Riyaz reached out through email, and shortly after we set up a time to Zoom. Immediately I thought, of course, this was meant to be. The way that he found our podcast, thank you Tammy Simon, his life, work, spiritual practice up to this point, his honesty, his vulnerability, all of it felt as though he was just destined to be a guest on the podcast. I'm very excited for you to hear this conversation. Riyaz is a therapist and a spiritual teacher, but most importantly, he's a genuine person, authentically imperfect, and as he lets us see that, he reveals the strength in that kind of acceptance and openness. This is Dying to Tell You. Just tell us your name and where in the world are you, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, my name is Riyaz, and I am in Fairfax, California, which is just north of San Francisco.
Right. Well, first of all, it might be nice to tell people how you heard about us. I'm really grateful that you heard about our podcast, and I would like to say where you heard about us.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. I was driving up to Sacramento from here, which is an hour and 40-minute drive, because I was actually trying to get into a clinical trial in Sacramento. I'll talk more about this maybe at some point, but yeah. I was going through a kind of a difficulty where the medication I'm on stopped working, and I was trying to get into a clinical trial. And so I was driving up there with, just some anxiety in my system, what's going to happen. And I was listening to a podcast called Insights at the Edge with Tammy Simon. And she was interviewing Rupert Spira. He's a spiritual teacher that I've followed for years and years and enjoyed his talks. And so I just noticed, before my drive, there's the new talk, a new interview with Rupert and Tammy. And I love Tammy as an interviewer. And so I'm listening to it. And about 20 minutes into that interview, which I was enjoying on the drive, there was this almost like a little plug or a commercial she said, hey, our producer, or I guess her producer on that show, Chris Rock, also is producing this other really amazing show called Dying to Tell You. And she talked about what the show was about. And it's for people with a terminal diagnosis or an illness and them getting to tell their stories. And she talked more about the premise of the podcast. And I thought, this sounds great. And then she said, and they're looking for people to interview. And if you know somebody, or if you are somebody that has a story about this, please contact them. And I just kind of had one of those moments where I thought, I think that might be me. And I kind of put it away, honestly. I just sort of I'll see if that comes back. I'll follow up on it. But I didn't really think about it. I had a lot else I was thinking about. And, and then on my way back from Sacramento, I get a call as I'm driving from my best friend, David, who says, hey, I just listened to this amazing Tammy Simon interview with Rupert Spira. I said, I know exactly what you're going to say. And he said, I think you should be on it. I think you'd be a good candidate to tell your story. And I thought, well, I think the universe is telling me maybe I need to be on this podcast. So that was the impetus for me contacting you, Cody.
So thank you for contacting us. I've been looking forward to this since we talked. It's been 2 months since we talked the first time. Okay, so tell us what your diagnosis is and maybe how you found out about it.
Okay, yeah. Well, my diagnosis is I have lung cancer, non-small cell lung cancer. by the time they found it was very advanced, stage 4, was way beyond my lungs in multiple different areas, organs and bones and my brain. And so it was very dramatic when I got the diagnosis. Yeah, there's a couple of stages to this diagnosis. So I will say one is when I first got the diagnosis, it was the end of August 2023. I was having some wheezing, some strange kind of at night. I was whistling. I'd wake up to the sort of my lungs wheezing, and I was feeling a bit short of breath, and something was going on. And I'm an athlete, I'm a cyclist, and I'm used to feeling pretty robust. And I was starting to notice that a couple of my bike rides, I was feeling really tired at the same time. And so I went into the doctors, and for a while they didn't know what was going on. They were following different things, but eventually at the end of August, an X-ray showed a mass, a dark shadow, which was concerning. A CT scan a few days later confirmed kind of the worst, which was that, yes, there was actually a large tumor and a couple of other tumors in both sides of the lungs, but that beyond that, it had spread to lymph nodes and to my liver and to my hips. And it was just a devastating diagnosis to receive.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Would you talk a little bit about the emotional response of kind of what was going through your mind when you heard that from your doctor? Were you in their office?
Yeah. No, I was actually at home. I had taken the CT scan and I was waiting for the results. I knew with the X-ray that it didn't look good, but you're always hopeful. Maybe it's
It's
something else, or
nothing.
it's something benign or
Yeah.
less scary than. And so I knew I was going to get a call from my doctor. I think he sort of said, I'll call you at the end of the day on whatever day it was, August 26th or something like that. And my wife and I were waiting for the call, and, very anxiously. And when we got the call and he laid out, yes, there's tumor in the lungs and it's quite large. And then there's a second and a third on the other, on both sides. And then he went on, and there was like another layer and another layer and another layer. It just was, just sort of almost out of body experience where you're just in a nightmare and you can't wake up. And it's way worse than my wife and I were hoping for, and even maybe braced against. We were braced against bad news, and it was just like,
Right. Worse than you could have imagined.
yeah. And so the emotional impact of it, honestly, was shock and just kind of almost out of body. Like it was just too much to process. It's hard to explain, but just like it's like everything gets turned up. Like your mind and your thoughts and your feelings and your excitation. Like it's like everything's firing at the same time. And there's not like any immediate danger. It's not like you can run or fight or anything, but it feels like that, and there's nothing to do.
Right. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. The idea that there is danger, right? But it's your body and kind of we've evolved, right, to react to danger in a certain way, and your body's reacting in this very in this way that to deal with danger that's immediate, and there's nothing you can do to get away from the danger that is already there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so it was a very intense experience. So luckily for I would say emotionally, just to kind of complete the picture of receiving that diagnosis, my wife and I are really lucky. We have some incredibly close friends that all live close to us here in Fairfax. And my wife's a therapist. I'm a therapist. Many of our friends are therapists. So we have some incredible support people around us, emotionally for sure, psychologically. And, after the X-ray, I'm in a men's group. I have 3 of my closest friends are in a men's group with me. We've been in it for 20 plus years. We've gone through everything with each other. And they all knew that I was getting this call at a certain time. And my wife is close to all of their partners, actually. And then there was a couple of other friends that are outside of that men's group, and they're all local. And we had just told everybody we're going to get this news and it could be devastating and we'll let you know what it is. But if it is really devastating, please come over. We could probably use the support. So within probably an hour of the call, and we put the call out, we put a text out, I think, to our group. All my friends started to trickle in and into the living room, and that was actually this moment where I just broke down. I just started to sob and shake and cry, and everybody just came around me like it was like a circle. They literally held me, and I was in the center of it, and I just shook and cried, and I just the emotional process. I came out of the shock, and I just went into the feeling of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then my wife Karen was in the middle as well, and they were all holding both of us, and it was just the beginning of something that started and has continued, which is incredible love and support and community has been tremendous. It's been one of the gifts and the blessings of this really difficult situation. There's no way I or my wife could be dealing with this with any kind of grace or kind of even-headedness without all the support we've had. And not that we're even-headed much of the time. I'm just saying it's just I can't imagine what it'd be like without it.
Yeah. What an amazing story. Just I don't know that I've ever heard of somebody who got a diagnosis like this and within hours had people around them like that. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
I know you didn't imagine that the diagnosis would be as bad as it turned out to be, but did you imagine that if it was bad news, that they were going to show up like that?
I will tell you this, that I am so blessed. I'm so close to these men in particular, but just all of our friends. We're really blessed, and in some ways, I just knew they would show up for us. Like that's just what we do for each other, actually. Yeah, I'm really blessed, and I think we all know we're blessed in this kind of close circle of friends, and we have to live locally, and so we've seen each other through a lot, divorces and illnesses and graduations and marriages and all, like just 20 plus years of life together as friends and as couples, and so it's like chosen family, really, and so like if you ask, do you know if most people, hopefully if you're lucky, did you doubt that your brother or your sister or your family would show up for you? It's like, no, they will. It's deep in you, and I have that. I'm really blessed to say I have that with these chosen family friends.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Sometimes I talk about cultivating longevity. I kind of do presentations about cultivating longevity as a healthcare worker and talk about things that hook me as I work with patients. And one of the things that kind of hook in a kind of a positive valence is love that is not obligatory. Like family love is great, but this kind of chosen family, these people are not obligated to love you or to show up for you, and for them to do that, it really touches me to hear you talking about it. Maybe a twinge of jealousy, but this is one of the gifts or one of the blessings that you've found from an unpleasant experience. And I wonder if there are some other kind of gifts that have come from the illness.
Yeah, boy, it's there's a lot I can say about it, actually, surprisingly, because it's devastating and horrible and difficult as it has been and is, there's undeniable gifts that have been part of the last 9 months that I've been in. And so the first one, of course, was just the incredible love and support of friends and community and family, and and it just kept extending. Here's the thing: like like I said, I'm a therapist. I've been a healer. In the last few years, I've been more of a spiritual teacher. I've been kind of transitioning into something, and so much of my orientation has been service. Like I help others. That was my role in my family. I'm sort of the helper. There's a very kind of strong identity and identification with, oh, I help. And I love to do that. And um, but things got completely inverted and flipped, and I was so humbled by this diagnosis that I just needed help, and I've needed help, and the help has been flowing in. And so that's been like, I've been so touched by that, and beyond just my immediate circle that I described. At some point, my friends started a GoFundMe to help us with some of the financial things, and that was very humbling and very hard for me, to be honest, to ask for help and to ask for financial help. Like that was a real stretch, but I knew I needed to do that, or we needed to do that. And then from that, people in the community, other parents that I've known over the years, we've coached or, been on the sidelines in soccer, or coached together, or old students of mine from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, old clients of mine, like people just came out of the woodwork with help and support. And, sometimes it was dollars, sometimes it was just words of encouragement.
It is beautiful to give, and there is a real gift in receiving as well that I think people often overlook, because there is such I don't know, I guess there's an emphasis on giving, and there's kind of a vulnerability about receiving help, support, that isn't always held up as nice or good.
It goes on, oh, it goes on. Ways that you get to me grow strong. It goes on, oh, it goes on. Ways that you're new to me grow strong. Some days we can stop the dark from rising. Guess we're working hard.
You were talking a little bit about, or you mentioned that it was a couple of parts to your diagnosis.
Yeah, two different stages to it. What I'll share is that, so this initial diagnosis was devastating and was very, a very difficult pill to swallow, and the prognosis was quite horrible. Did not look good at all.
Did they tell you a certain amount of time, or?
I never asked a specific question, but I got pretty clearly that from just the conversation, the way it went with the oncologist, that if I made it to 2 years, that would have been a really good outcome.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was, that's what it was looking like. And so we were on that track for a couple of months, like, okay, starting in October, I'm going to be on starting chemotherapy, and that's going to buy us some time, but that's going to be its own thing, of course,
Right.
And so I was sort of reconciled to that. That's the best we can do. And if that's going to extend, give me a few more months or maybe years, that would be worth it. So that's where we were oriented. And I will tell you that this 2-month period before I got a little bit of a reprieve, and I'll share that in a moment.
Yeah.
This 2 months was so intense because there was nothing to hold on to. There was no hope. It was just like, wow, this is just happening and it's out of control. And I can maybe share more about this later, but it was actually a very profound experience for me, because in the recognition that there was nothing to hold on to, I completely let go. And I had kind of a probably 8-week period where I was more present and more alive and more free than I've ever been.
Mm.
And despite going through the worst time in my life and the worst diagnosis of my life, people were kind of shocked by it. I was just every day, almost every moment, just vitally present and open-hearted and interested in the present moment, and there was no problem as long as I was in the present. And so I'll say more about that, and that's a lot of kind of my spiritual practice, and this has been a profound spiritually. If you asked me earlier, what are the blessings spiritually, the awakening, the opening, the deepening, this has been my greatest teacher, honestly, spiritually, and I can say more about that.
Yeah.
But so I had this 8-week period where there was nothing to hold on to, and it was horrible. But I was still functioning. I was still, going to see consultants and getting experts, and there was even though I was completely in the moment, I was completely invested in living and extending my life and doing what it took. So, and then somewhere in the middle of that, they did some genetic testing on the biopsy, and she had mentioned, the oncologist had mentioned, there was a very small chance, that there's I would qualify for what they call targeted medication, but if my genetic testing came back, but like a less than 4% chance or something like that. So I wasn't even really kind of thinking about that, and we went in for the results of my genetic testing, Karen and I, and we found out from the oncologist that, good news, you are what they call ALK positive, which is a genetic marker that shows a certain way that this lung cancer has developed. And the best news about that is there are medications that will go in and block the receptors of the cancer and block their reproduction. And it was like we knew in that moment, oh my God, this is an incredible reprieve. And we were bouncing up and down with the oncologist. It was just this joyous moment where, it was almost, we'd let go of hope, and then something came in almost miraculously. And, it was not a slam dunk. There was still a question like, okay, it works for most people, but it doesn't work for everybody. And then, there's more to it. These TKIs, the medication that I take, have limitations to them, and they have expiration dates to them and things like that. So it wasn't a forever cure. It was just a temporary kind of cure. And so, about a little over 2 months after I got the initial diagnosis, I got the second diagnosis, and then I started this medication soon after. It was called lorlatinib. It was a TKI that made an incredible difference almost immediately, almost within a week or so. I started to notice the difference.
This is very similar to Aaron. The first person we interviewed for the podcast had a similar kind of genetic mutation that his was ROS1, I believe, and got a very similar kind of reprieve, it seemed like. When you say you noticed a difference immediately, you're saying you noticed a physical difference almost immediately?
Oh, yeah. Prior to taking the medication, I was dealing with a nagging cough that was sort of, daily and kind of intermittent. I was fatigued. I didn't have as much energy. I was short of breath. So that was just kind of like my baseline, my day to day. And I think it was, definitely within a week, it might have been within 5 days, I started to notice myself feeling more energy. And I think I couldn't quite believe it, but I was like, I think my cough is starting to lessen and I'm breathing better. And sure enough, definitely by 2 weeks, it was really clear. It was obvious. I was like, oh, most of my symptoms were down to, if not zero, like probably 10% of what they had been. So it was quite dramatic. Within a couple of weeks, everything started to alleviate. And then within a month or two, I was sort of back to a fairly normal life. I started riding my bike again. I started hiking. I was able to start seeing clients and working again. And it's like things went from black and white to color all of a sudden. Like the movie completely changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At that point, did your oncologist kind of update your prognosis for you?
Nobody gave me a particular prognosis. What I did was I started to educate myself about ALK positive, and there's a Facebook page and there's a website, and And there's all sorts of information out there, and there's different generations of medication. And so I just started to learn all about this. I have a friend now slash mentor who is ALK positive. It's a crazy story. When I first got my lung cancer, one of my friend's colleagues said, "Listen, I know this guy that has lung cancer. He's kind of beaten the odds. He's like almost 9 years into it, and he's alive and vital. And you should talk to him because maybe we can learn something." I talked to him. He was really great. We emailed and then we chatted, and he said, "Listen, this is in the first couple of months." He says, "You have lung cancer. I have lung cancer, but I have ALK positive. It's very rare. The chances of you having it are not going to be very likely, but I'll still be a support for you, and I'll be here for you." You know, fast forward, I came back to Jeff and I said, "Hey, I'm part of the club. I'm ALK positive." And he couldn't believe it. Anyway,
I mean, what are the odds?
Exactly. And so now he and I are like friends and mentors, and and he introduced me to another guy, but I started to learn that there are some really good outcomes. Like Jeff has been going 9 years now since his initial diagnosis. He's been on 3, and now he's on his 4th TKI, because each one will stop working eventually. The cancer will mutate and find its way around it, and then you're hoping you've got another option that can deal with those mutations. So that's the name of the game, is you just need to stay alive so you can kind of catch the next wave, if you're lucky, of medication that can address what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So he's been playing that game and staying ahead of it, just barely. I call him Tarzan, kind of swinging from vine to vine, but you never know there's going to be another vine. You just sometimes are in midair, just hoping you're going to catch him. But he seems to have done it, multiple times. So he's like my hero, my mentor. Like if I can follow in his footsteps, that would be great. But to come back to your question, the range, it's really variable. Some people are having amazing outcomes, and some people are not. And you never know how your body's going to respond. What I was reading was that the average ALK time to, I forget what the term exactly was, but maybe time to progression or something like that was 6.8 years was what was the average. So with these medications, people were doing pretty well, and so for me, I started to kind of orient around that number, like, if I can do that, that would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see. I have hopes for beyond that, and I also have lots of anxieties that tell me I may not make that, so it's a lot of unknown, and I can talk more about that. But
well, please do.
Living with uncertainty is kind of the name of the game now.
Yeah, would you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think we do a lot of things in our lives. We set up systems and routines all to make us feel safe and certain, when in reality, it's all a hoax. We're not safe ever. And there's living with uncertainty is just, that's a constant, even though we don't really notice.
Yeah.
Because we try to make ourselves.
Most of us have the illusion of certainty,
Right.
kind of the denial of the uncertainty kind of rules the day. And we have moments where we get anxious about it or we worry about things, but most of the time we're kind of on an autopilot of certainty. Like you just kind of assume you're going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to be around in a year and you're going to have a retirement, or, you just kind of are on that trajectory mentally, conceptually. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some utility to that. I think we can't live with that level of uncertainty every moment, being aware of it. It's too much,
Yeah.
And yet I was being faced with that level of uncertainty, and still am being faced somewhat with it.
Right.
And so I had to find a way to live with that. And so what I will say is, just if I back it up a little bit, I mentioned before some of my spiritual practice, and that's a deep orientation that I've always had. I'm kind of a meditator, and there's kind of a Buddhist orientation that I've had. It's not just Buddhist, but it's kind of probably this shorthand way of describing it.
Yeah.
And for years now, I've been, prior to my diagnosis, and in Buddhism, there is kind of practices like this, but I kind of my spontaneous practices of contemplating my death, of actually waking up to that reality and not being in denial of it. And the idea from this perspective is that the more you can be aware of your finiteness, the more you can kind of embrace the uncertainty, the more present and the more alive and the more precious each moment becomes, because we're not on autopilot. We're actually tasting the preciousness of now, because that's all we're given. And there's nothing guaranteed beyond that. And so I've been practicing with this in various ways. I'd been on retreats that I would go on. I'd find myself in the woods in the dark, facing my fear of death and working with that, and lots of other experiences. And so all of that had been part of my practice. And then all of a sudden, I didn't need to conjure anything. It was vivid and larger than life. Like all the knobs had been turned up. And it was like I said, the first 8 weeks was powerful because there was nothing to hold on to. There was no certainty. And I just somehow, like in seeing the truth of that, was liberated and just was like free to just live. Like, I'm alive now. I'm going to live and love as best as I can because that's all I've got.
Right.
And so there was a beauty that came through in that terror, and then what I started to notice happened actually, Cody, was that I started to take the medication as I described in this reprieve, and I started to feel better, and I started to feel almost normal. And then what I started to notice was that, these knobs that have been turned way up on, like I said, on vitality and presence and openness, it just in the moment, things started to get a little dimmer, not dramatically, but just a little dimmer. And I started to notice that, I've gone back into a mindset of assuming I've got a future. And I was living in my mind again. And a lot of what I started to notice I would do was I was researching online about the medications and what the next medication could be and how long my medication will work and how do I maximize it. And what I started to notice was I was starting to get preoccupied with prolonging my life and preoccupied with the anxiety of what could happen tomorrow, what might happen, and my mind trying to prevent it preemptively, just conceptually. And because of my practice and my orientation, I actually didn't enjoy that. I thought, I'm not enjoying living in my mind. I don't like being preoccupied by my thinking. And I'd been so liberated from that for a long period of time. And even my practice prior to that was that in without the intensity of my diagnosis, a lot of my practices allowed me to kind of not live in my mind.
Maybe we can change our world around. Maybe we can waste this fertile ground. The time we have may never come around. The time we have can surely be right now. Oh, maybe we should hope against the odds.
There is anxiety, of course there is, about the future, and I love my life, and I love my wife, and I love my son, and I want to be around, and there's like uncertainty about how long I'll be around and if I'll be around for certain things that I want to be around for. And so what I would do is my mind would constantly be imagining futures or imagining ways to extend the future, and what I noticed about that was it just took me away from the present. It took me away from enjoying the present. And I was just, when I'm caught in my mind, I just can feel I'm less present and less available for life today.
Right.
And so what I started to do was I just really started to practice letting go of tomorrow. And it's a very simple thing, but I would do this every day. I would really kind of, after different practices and things, I would kind of come back to I don't know about tomorrow. I can't know about tomorrow. And I don't need to know about tomorrow. And that would liberate me, especially that last step. I don't need to know about tomorrow. And something about the truth of that would bring me back into I just have now. And I get now, and I'm so grateful for now, and I'm going to live it fully. And tomorrow will take care of itself. And so I just, that's my practice every day is to, and in a way, it's like what I'm doing is I'm facing the uncertainty. I'm looking it straight in the eye, and I'm not letting it preoccupy me in a sort of conceptual defensive way where I'm constantly kind of trying to imagine other futures or imagine the worst future. So that's a big part of my practice now.
It sounds like a kind of a mantra. It reminds me so much of Jesus's words in the Sermon on the Mount. Why do you worry about tomorrow? Let tomorrow take care of itself, right? And also the words of Ram Dass come to mind, and he says, you must remember your Buddha nature and also your social security number. Because you have to live, right? You have to live in this world. You have to participate in this world. So I mean, this is for me personally, but also for people that might be listening to this. How do you reconcile? Because there is a level of planning and participation in life that you need to do, right? You got to plan in order to go get your treatment or whatever it is. So there is a level in which, on a plane on which you have to participate in that way. So there is some planning and some future thought. So how do you reconcile that with the idea of letting go of needing to know about tomorrow?
Yeah. I really appreciate the question. It's a great question. Yeah, both are true. Mostly what my practice is to and I was watching Ram Dass actually on a documentary on coming home last night, actually, and he was talking about this as he was facing the end of his life and the last few years. He would really talk about the soul's perspective that in essence, if we really understand ourselves as a soul primarily prior to our very human incarnation, that aspect of our being, you could call it our Buddha nature, is sort of eternal, is untouched by the ups and downs of manifestation of this human life. And it's really helpful to be in touch with that or have ways to keep touching back into that, because that is actually and for me has been and continues to be a deep refuge that despite the storms of my life and the ups and downs and the uncertainties, there's a stability and a peace that is always there if I can find it. It's not always there, but it's there waiting if I can find
Thank
it.
you. Thank you for saying that you don't always.
Yeah.
I don't want people to get the idea that any of us are doing this all the time.
Oh, God. Yeah. I don't want anybody to get that idea because it wouldn't be true.
Right.
And yet it's my practice over and over again. My orientation is to find that, to make space for that. And then there's also the human in me that goes through all the ups and downs and is scared and all of that. So to come back to your question, the human still needs to plan. The human, I will share that my medication, my TKI medication, stopped working 6 months, 5 months really into it, much sooner than the average would be, much sooner than I'd hoped for. So I had a big shock just happen in the last month or two, where I had to scramble and go, okay, this medication is not working. My cancer is progressing in a couple of areas. My oncologists are saying we need to find something else. And luckily there is a clinical trial at UC Davis that I managed to get into and have just started this week, just a few days ago. And so it's another hope. It's a hopeful medication. It's on trial. It's not, kind of approved yet, but it has some promise to it. It's got a little bit of a track record to it so far. But anyway, I had to do all the steps to find out about the study, to find out how to get into the study, to gather the materials and the lab tests, and and go through the hoops. And that's the very human mind. Social Security number, you got that part of me that remembers my number. Like, that part needs to be totally engaged. I can't just sit in Buddha nature and kind of just go, well, tomorrow will take care of itself. No, I
Right.
actually need to take care of
Right.
of tomorrow. If I
Yeah.
get into that study tomorrow, that's really important. And I need to
Right.
do a lot of things now. So what I will say about that, it's challenging. Both of these aspects kind of, I go back and forth between them. But what I will say is that my best endeavor when I go towards the planning, the doing, the all of that, is I try to come less from fear and anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
and I really try to orient from love and life force. Like, the thing that's really come forward in all of this is, boy, I have an incredible life force. I have an incredible desire to live. Like, that is, as spiritual as I might be, and as spiritual as my spiritual practice is to surrender and to accept what is. Like, that's a big part of it, and I'm doing that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Part of what is, oh my God, I want to live. Every cell in me wants to live, and that part of me, I kind of see as my love force as much as my life force. Like, I want to love. I love life, and so if I can come from there and plan from there and do from there, it feels very different from when I'm kind of anxiously, fearfully, scarily just going through all these motions, because then I'm still not enjoying my life. I'm kind of waiting till I get to some place.
Yeah. It's a mindset shift, just how you approach it. You're not doing anything different. You are changing the way you're coming at it from a place of love and hope. It was really helpful to hear you talk about that. Thank you.
I could say more about it if you don't mind.
Please,
Cody.
please.
One of the things that happened early on, right at the very beginning of my diagnosis, is everything came into question. Like, all my spiritual beliefs, all my orientation, my whole life I'd been saying and I'd been teaching, and really kind of my mantra had been, up until my diagnosis, life happens for me, life doesn't happen to me. And that perspective has kind of guided me, and it's really helped me in so many situations. My mantra had been for years, life happens for me, life doesn't happen to me. And that was a way that I would take whatever was happening and turn towards it with a kind of, not a reactivity or a resistance, but kind of a curiosity, as you mentioned earlier, or an embrace. Like, what is this? How do I meet it so that it can transform me or grow me or evolve me, even if it's difficult, even if it's beautiful, and all of it, And then all of a sudden, this diagnosis happened, which was extreme beyond anything I'd gone through. It was just like of another magnitude entirely of all the difficult things I'd gone through. And I remember sitting for maybe 24 hours or so and kind of feeling, can I say that about this? Because this feels like it's fucking been done to me. Excuse my French. There was a lot of swearing happening back then. Yeah, there was a lot of swearing happening just spontaneously back then, because it's like you need extreme words to express the extremity of what you're in, and this normal language doesn't quite cut it sometimes. It feels a little too tame, a little too middle of the road, Anyway, right. So I sat with that for a while. I remember feeling like, really? And then something just kind of distilled, and I was like, no, this is happening for me. And and it is a mindset. It is a mindset. I'm going to learn from this and grow from this and have this open me and change me, because I really understood it spiritually, and because my deepest orientation is a spiritual orientation. And so, in a way, I just said, this has been placed on my altar. This is here on my path. This is my path. It's not a mistake. It's what life is giving me.
It is.
And I can't just kind of, I don't see life that way. I see life as seamless flow, and I'm part of that, as we all are. And there's no mistakes. And from a soul perspective, everything is experience. Everything is here to evolve us and change us. And that's my deepest orientation. And so I said, I have to look at it this way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's made all the difference for me, Cody. And it still does every day, because it's very easy. And anybody else going through this, it's very easy to go, poor me. It's very easy to go, I'm a victim. Why is it happening to me? Why is it happening to my family? It's just a human. And I don't blame anybody for those thoughts. I have those thoughts.
Of course.
But what I have committed to, and I'm committed to, is I actually don't want to stop there. I don't want to live from those thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that to be my orientation. And so for me, the way I turn that around is I look at it from a soul perspective, which is this eternal kind of thing that is incarnated and is having these experiences and growing and learning from these experiences, some of them beautiful and magical and lovely, and some of them difficult and hard. And this one, way more difficult and way more hard than ever. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of have seen it as an initiation in some ways for me into the humanity, into what it means to be human. It's like, wow, like sickness and death and disease happens. And I used to kind of think that it happened to everybody else, but somehow not me, not my magical, healthy, blessed life.
Yeah.
Or if it did happen, it would happen later at the end, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, but it's here now. And I have to embrace it. And I don't have to, but I do. And right. I see it as my greatest teacher. And I've learned, like, you come back to what you said about what are the blessings. So many blessings, so many awarenesses, so many things have opened for me in these last 9 months that, strangely enough, at times I would have said, like, I am grateful for this experience. Yeah. And thank you, cancer. Like, I've actually said that and felt that at times. I don't feel that all the time. I'm not saying it's kind of where I live, but there's profound realizations and moments of it's not what you think it is. It's not what I thought it was. It's way beyond that.
Yeah. So you said you don't live there, right? In that space of thank you, cancer. Do you still have, and probably not always and probably not as often as you might have if you didn't have this kind of orientation and mindset, but do you still have those thoughts about why me, or anxieties that come up, or, you know, even fear of death, or worried that you are going to get as long of a life as you had hoped, or those things still come up for you?
I have to work with those maybe almost daily. So they come up for me when I say I have to work with them. Like those thoughts, those feelings are, yeah.
That's the difference I see in you versus, a patient that maybe I worked with who lives in that place of why me, I can't accept this, there is a mistake, something's wrong. What I'm hearing from you is you have the thoughts, you're aware of the thoughts, and then you can work with the thoughts. Are they useful? Is that helpful? Is that how you want to be, who you want to be in the circumstance that is happening now? This is real. This is life. This is what's happening. Mm-hmm. How do you want to be? Who do you want to be? Is it that fearful, kind of why me, almost pouty, like something's been done to you? Mm-hmm. Though that would be I think my reaction would be that. And I would hope that my response would be something more along the lines of what you're doing, which is, okay, I'm having the thought. I notice it. What do I want to do with it?
Yeah. It's exactly right, Cody. I think you're getting it. And I have my pouty days, and I have my pouty moments, and I have my fuck this, I hate this, and why me, and all of that. Like, that's just real. It's just very human, and I wouldn't blame anybody. I would be surprised if anybody didn't have those thoughts or feelings.
Yeah.
And yet I am like, I think this is my spiritual orientation and my practice, my mindfulness practice. I am not my thoughts. I am not my feelings.
Right.
You know, I have feelings, I have thoughts, but there's some space that I can, if I practice, and I have to practice, I have to work with it, by the way,
Yeah.
to kind of feel that, oh, there's actually something that's free of that, something that's aware of that, something that's beyond that. Yeah.
It's so good. Thank you so much. But what I really want people to hear is that, well, one, there's a different way, another way to approach things, and two, that even a person who is spiritually adept still has the thoughts that we all have, which are fearful, and I mean mainly fearful. It's fearful and angry, I guess, but and that there's nothing wrong with that, and there's space for that, and it doesn't have to overwhelm you or dictate who you are and how you are.
Exactly. And the real key is like, fear is just, you have to make friends with it. You have to kind of find a way to be with it. And for me, what I'm finding is that if I just face all of the feelings and thoughts and really am with them, there's so much more behind it. Like for example, you know, often what I can feel is like I'm not actually not afraid to die. I'm not like in the moment I feel like I will surrender and I can embrace that. And in many ways I can feel like I've had an amazing life and I feel blessed. And all of that I think is true. And I do not want to not grow old with my wife and see my son, you know, grow into the man he will be and get married, hopefully, and have children and be a grandparent. And all these dreams for my career and all these things that are still unfulfilled. Like there's like grief, anticipatory grief about that. And what I notice is that if I just let myself feel my grief fully when it comes up, it's interesting. Like it's like I come out the other side into the love, because that's all that grief is. I realize I've always known this conceptually, but I know it so much more experientially. That grief is just the other face of love, you know, and it's inevitable. Actually, loss is inevitable, and it's crazy and foolish to love, and yet we can't help it. And if you try to prevent loss by preventing your love, you diminish your life tremendously. And if you love fully, you open yourself to loss. Like it just
Lots and lots of pain. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's lots and lots of pain here. There is. But if I just open to it, I just realize it's just love. It's just love. And oh my God, I'm so blessed to have so much love, and I don't want to lose it. And so honestly, in these last 9 months, I've cried more than ever before in my life. I barely cried before. I was not much of a crier. I would cry, but you know, occasionally, not very often. I can't stop crying. My wife looks at me like, "Who are you?" in a really sweet way, you know, because she was the crier, and I would almost tease her, you know, like, "Oh my God, you're crying again." And now she's literally almost teases me, like, "Oh my God."
What do you think, you're dying?
Exactly. But honestly, my crying is my superpower now, because what it is it's just like my body and my nervous system and my heart, like letting myself move the energy through me.
Yeah.
And often, not often, always, after a few minutes, I just feel better, and I feel more present, and I feel more open, and I'm happy to be alive and happy like to have had the cry. But it's like, and often, by the way, it's just, I feel like a crazy man. What starts out as tears ends up in laughter.
Yeah.
I can't even explain it. And I don't even know if I'm laughing or crying half the time. I'm doing both at the same time.
Sometimes there's no difference. Yeah.
There's no difference. It's like, I feel like a little bit like a madman sometimes. You know, but I just let that happen when it happens. So it's not pretty. I don't mean to say I'm meditating and rising above all of this. I'm in the trenches like never before. Yeah.
So we'll handle across the banks. Follow the curve of the river, like gardens and streams. Our souls will revive. I don't wanna learn, and I don't wanna rest. That's already neither. Is that alright? Is that alright? Is that alright?
You just started this new trial, and you're hoping that it's going. Yeah, I mean, what are you hoping for? I get the feeling that it's a hope that this prolongs your life some more. Are you feeling okay?
Yeah, I'm feeling okay. There's the places that the progression has happened in my cancer so far haven't manifested in obvious physical ways, and I'm not feeling particularly fatigued. So my body's doing okay. It's a strange thing when you have cancer. People will relate to this. Every new symptom you have, which are just normal symptoms of being 57 years old, by the way, like your body creaks and you wake up with new stuff all the time and you're like, oh my God, you worry, right? And so I've been having this back pain for the last couple of weeks. And it's a little different from back pain I've had in the past, and it's close to my spine. And that was one of the areas of bone progression.
Okay.
So I worry about that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it is anything, and it's actually gotten a little better in the last few days. So I'm a little less worried about it. But, there's things like that are going on. But for generally speaking, I'm actually doing all right. And I have this cough that also won't go away, and the doctors can't quite figure out what that is. And the worry is that it's my lungs and there's something worse, but the scans haven't shown anything worse recently, which is about 6 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So anyway, there's some, I'm not in great health, perfect health, but I'm in decent health.
Yeah.
And there's anxieties about it. But the clinical trial, just to come back to what you're saying, I just started it. There is a lot of hope that this medication will work and deal with the progressions that the last medication stopped working with. There's no guarantee that will work. We'll just, it's sort of like you wait and see. And then, maybe in your scans in 6 weeks from now, I'll have a sense of like, okay, is it lessening or is it not? Mm-hmm. But there's hope around that. And I think reason to hope. And then you're in what my friend Jeff, who I mentioned before, sort of my mentor and my friend who's ahead of me, he refers to scanxiety, which is like, as a cancer patient, you get scans every usually 3 months, and sometimes if you're doing well, like every 6 months. I'm part of this trial, so every 6 weeks at the beginning, I'll be getting scans. And then you go through the anxiety of like, what will it show? Well, like it's sort of this bizarre thing where cancer is a strange thing. For the most part, you cannot know what's happening in your body. You could be getting better, you could be getting worse, and you just kind of wait for this image to go, here's what's actually happening. So, I'll go through the different scans and I'll know in 6 weeks, maybe more information. And then in 6 more weeks, and what I'm hoping for, the best case scenario is that it works, and obviously that it works for a long time. Mm-hmm. And when these drugs work well, they can work for years.
Really? Okay.
The last drug that I was on, the latest study just came out recently. It was dismaying to see. But it's showing that people have, on average, up to 5 years before they have progression with that. And I got, 5 months, 6 months. So I really went through, talk about poor me. I got the short end of the stick. Like I had a few days where I really was kind of licking my wounds and feeling pretty horrible.
Yeah.
And so the hope is, obviously, I have the years, and then the hope is that in years when you have progression, there's something else on the horizon that you can take, or some new medication or vaccine. There's always stuff they're developing. So there is hope, by the way, and I have not given up hope. And there's also just a kind of sobriety of like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. If it doesn't, if it doesn't work, if it doesn't give you years, if there is no more options, if there are no more options for treatment, and and you are just living with your cancer, and it will do what it will do, what would you hope for then?
Hmm. Well, I hope to continue living the way I'm living as best as I can. And what I mean by that is just, each day is an opportunity to love. Each day is an opportunity to be present and to enjoy whatever I can enjoy. And mostly and mainly, I think, especially when I come to that stage, um, I just want to enjoy my family, my loved ones, and my closest friends, and to be present with them as best as my body will allow me to, and my pain or my debilitation will, and my hope is that my practices will still be orienting me to not be lost or caught in my mind or in my anxieties or my fear or even my pain. So I can be somewhat just present for what's right in front of me,
Yeah.
for who's right in front of me. And I know that will get more and more and more challenging, and I'm kind of like I'm just gonna keep loving and practicing as best as I can until I can't,
Yeah.
until it's all taken away from me. But as long as I have some life force in me, I'm going to try to orient it towards what I'm oriented towards already.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that part of your practice has been confronting your death. It seems like even before the cancer. Would you talk a little bit more about that and how you do that, and how it has been helpful for you?
Yeah, I've been a meditator for years and many years, and I kind of have different practices of inquiry and working with my mind and my emotions and my body. And I teach this, and so it's like, oh, I was feeling like I kind of had figured things out, not really, but kind of relatively well. And then all of a sudden, I got thrown into the deep end beyond anything I'd ever been thrown into. And it's interesting, I will tell you, after an initial kind of period of really feeling wobbly, all my practices kicked in, and I was so thankful for them. But all my practices have been transformed. Um, I don't really meditate in the way I used to. And I'll tell you what happened. It's kind of really interesting.
Yeah.
In those first couple of days of the diagnosis of before, the reprieve and the full harsh intensity of it, I woke up one morning and I went out. I live in a townhouse complex here, and we're surrounded by nature. It's a beautiful area. And I went out in the morning just in a stupor, just like I'd been run over by a truck, and somehow I'd been wandering still like alive. And emotionally, that's how I felt. And, psychologically, I just was. And I right at the edge of our property, there's a circle of redwood trees. There's like 8 or 9 redwood trees. And I've been in those trees before, in that circle before, occasionally. It was actually planted, interestingly enough. There's a little plaque there that says Ivor Grove, and it is a dedication from a daughter to her father who died. They probably lived in this area back in 1976. She planted it, so almost 50 years ago. And so I just found myself stumbling into the center of this redwood circle, and just, I think I was in tears. I think I was just in shock, and I leaned back against the tree. Oh no! First thing I did was I stood in there. I saw that the plaque was upside down. It's on a little wooden platform, very low to the ground, a few inches off the ground, and somehow it had swiveled upside down. And even in my stupor, even in my kind of devastated, I just thought that's not right, and I turned it back so it looked right, kind of out of respect, because it's an honoring of this man and her father, um, and so then I kind of, after I did that, I forgot about that, and I just ended up leaning back against one of these redwoods, had my back against it, and I just was praying, just desperately praying for help. Like, help me with this. And in the midst of my prayer, I hear the sound of something, and I open my eyes and I catch the wood on this plaque, the plaque swiveling back upside down. And for whatever reason, Cody, I just got chills through my whole body. And I don't know how, but wordlessly, what I got at the same time was I felt like this redwood circle saying, "We are turning ourselves over to you," as the plaque was turning over. I just got chills through my whole body, and I felt this sort of invitation that this is your place. I can't tell you what that was or how that happened or if it's true even, really. What does that mean, right?
Right.
Felt something really, really true, really deep. And right then and there, I started to cry, and I had this, I forget what happened that first day, but something happened in there where I felt blessed and healed and supported. And I have gone back to those trees every morning. That's my practice. I go into that circle, and a whole series of practices and rituals and prayer and energy work and meditation have happened and happen every morning. And it's through the support of nature and through the resourcing, and I connect to the trees, and through that I connect to the earth, and I connect to all the elements. My practice has become a nature practice. I have kind of felt so much love and so much support and so much energy from nature. And so I find myself resourcing every day in the trees, but then also beyond that, spend a lot of time in nature. And that has given me solace and strength and comfort beyond anything I could imagine. Yeah.
Is it the realization or the maybe just the realization of being connected to nature and that you are a part of the thing that's been going on for millions of years? Is that what's comforting to you, or is there something else about that that's about being in nature that's comforting?
Well, there's so many different things, layers to it. Yes, that is kind of there. Whether I think about it or not, I think it's intuitive. I think when I'm in nature and when I'm practicing in these ways where I'm really opening to all of the elements, like I really have a lot of practices where I energetically and imaginally connect with the earth and with the trees and with the birds and with the sky and with the sun and the moon, and I have ways. What I start to do is I feel myself as nature. I feel myself as completely interconnected with nature. And then there's this like an intuitive understanding that birth and death are all natural, and there's nothing to be feared, and this is all natural. And that just gets communicated actually beyond my mind in a way. It's just like my body harmonizes with that truth. Mm-hmm. And that's a tremendous blessing. And then I will say, and this sounds woo-woo, but I feel the benevolence of nature. Like when I'm in there, I have a relationship with those trees now. Like those trees are my brothers and my sisters. I talk to them, and they don't talk to me in an obvious way, but I feel their presence. I feel their love. They're always there. I can go there anytime I'm in tension or discomfort. I was there last night. I was there this morning. I might go there again this afternoon. I just go see my friends, and they love me. And they're always like there with their still, silent presence. And it just gives me tremendous comfort. And I feel like I'm part of something, and I feel loved. And then in that, and I think this is so important, and I've gotten a lot of holding from humans. I have a lot of support, my men's group and my friends, and I have an energy worker, body worker, like all of that helps me to metabolize what is a lot of energy and a lot of anxiety and a lot of thought and a lot of feeling. Like we need that. I need that. I needed a lot of holding from humans, but I have this more than human world that holds me now, and these trees that hold me. And in there, I can fall apart. I'm crying in there half the time.
Yeah.
I'm laughing in there the other half.
Right.
And like it's just like thank good, like for me that's been such a powerful practice, and for me that works. Nature has really been a place of solace.
It made me think of earlier when you were talking about kind of accepting your diagnosis and noting that it's not a mistake, that this is for you, in very much the same way that nature is birth and death. There's no mistake. It's not a mistake. It's the way it is. And but I have two more questions that we kind of end on. But if there are other things that you feel like you need to get out.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate the question. If I could kind of crystallize it into just a more simple statement, I will say this is really important. For me, cancer, but it could be any other diagnosis or terminal kind of situation. Of course, we have ideas about it and understandings about it. And collectively, for cancer, I'll say in particular, that word has a lot of energy. It has a stigma. It has a kind of horrific kind of halo to it, you know. And I have that too, of course. But my experience has been that it's not what I think it is. It's not what we think it is. It's so much more. And so, I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you personally are in it, or if you know somebody personally in it, like be open to it. Isn't just a curse. It isn't just a bad thing. Of course, it is in that traditional sense. It's not a good thing in that sense. But there are so many layers to it and facets to it and gifts that can come if you have an alive, curious relationship to it. And I think that the mindset of you as the patient, but also the people around you, is so important because, fear is contagious, right? And anxiety is contagious and negativity is contagious, but the opposite is also true. Hope is contagious, and positivity and curiosity and compassion. And so I just think like it's full of everything, and it can be so much more than it has been, so much more than I imagined it would be, and it continues to be.
Yeah. The way that we talk about cancer and fighting cancer and battling cancer, and I get it, and I feel like it sometimes robs the moment of a lot of potential. It is all of the things, right? It's anxiety, it's fear, it's frustration, it's indignation, and it's opening up and acceptance and love and compassion and hope and showing up for each other in special ways. It can be so much more than just a battle. So thank you for that. Beautiful.
Yeah. Well, you get it, Cody. I can tell
Well,
you've clearly been around so many people have gone through so many versions of this, so you've been transformed, and I so appreciate why you're doing this podcast and allowing me to be on the podcast, because you're trying to have a different. I think you're trying to do the same thing that I was just saying, which is like it's so much more than we think it is. It's so much more than our messaging about death and about disease. There's so much more here. Yeah.
Okay, so the last two things. One is I know you have thought about your death. Have you given thought to how you want it to be? The moment, or the moments.
Yeah. Like I did listen to the first episode with Aaron,
Oh, yeah,
when
yeah.
I was like first just kind of knew about your podcast. I thought, let me check this guy out and check out this podcast before I decide to
Yeah.
tell him I want to be on it. And
Right.
I really enjoyed it. And I could see how much Aaron had thought about
So
his
much.
death and his dying process. And I was struck as I listened to him, like how little I had thought about it. Um, because I'm so focused on today and I'm so focused on living now, that I'll think about that when that's becoming closer to today.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm luckily very far away from that in terms of just experientially, subjectively. I'm not facing that. I will tell you, it's really obvious to me, it's clear to me that I would love it to be at home. I'd love it to be with my loved ones around me, my family and my friends. Um, I don't want to be in the hospital if I can help it, and I don't even really want to be prolonging it with endless medications and procedures. Um, I'd like to find a somewhat graceful way to go out somewhat lucidly and with my goodbyes and with my love and my appreciation for the people around me so I can hear them and receive them and they can hear me and receive me. That's ideal.
Yeah.
I know that things get crazy and ugly and difficult sometimes, but that's my hope.
Yeah.
That's as far as I've thought it through. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's I think that's a reasonable amount to have thought it through. And I appreciate if you had said I don't care, that would have been an acceptable answer too. But I do think that when somebody doesn't want to be in the hospital, if that's a real wish, you can make that happen most of the time. Obviously, things happen and that a lot is out of our control. But if that's what you want and your loved ones know that, you can make it happen. So you can't control everything about the way it goes, but you can certainly the big things. I think you can have some influence over at least. So. And the last question is, how do you want to be remembered?
It's interesting. What comes up for me is what I've been feeling lately is it's less about how people think about me and just more like I trust, I really do actually, that my impact lives on, my energy lives on, my influence, whatever you want to call it. It just I live on through the ways that I've touched people and the way that I'm still alive in them or things have happened, and people remember me the way they remember me, but I hope that my impact has been positive and people feel me with them and feel that impact with them. Um, it's interesting. It's kind of like I don't know if I'm answering the same question as you, but it's like it's not that I'm remembered. I don't know about that. I don't really care about that. But I love that somehow I live on in some energetic vibration in some way. And like, I had a student of mine talking yesterday with me. He teaches now at the university that I used to teach at, and he was telling me all about how he was teaching this thing that I taught him that he was so inspired by. And he was quoting me, kind of referencing me, but mostly just teaching what I taught. And I was so touched because I just felt like, oh, there I go on somehow.
Mm,
It's not me, but it's what was most important to me. I was able to pass it on, and that somehow lives on and maybe will be passed on in different ways. And, not, I don't need to be credited in that, but there's something beautiful about that for me.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I like it. Good answer. Good job. High five. Okay, I think that's it. I think we did it.
Mm.
Do you feel good?
I really, really appreciate the conversation, and I really appreciate you.
I I so appreciate you. I'm feeling so grateful to be able to I mean, what a gift to be able to talk. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I just really appreciate you. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for contacting us, for taking that chance to contact us, and then for being generous enough to share all of so much vulnerability, to share this kind of personal stuff with a stranger, but also with strangers.
My pleasure and my honor. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Of course.
And thanks for what you're doing. I really mean it. I think it's a powerful and beautiful thing, your podcast and what you're allowing to be part of the dialogue, the greater dialogue.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Riyaz, what a privilege it was to spend this time with you. Your honesty, openness, acceptance, it's inspiring to me. In the weeks since we recorded this, I found myself in moments of frustration repeating, life happens for me, not to me. And I don't know about tomorrow. I can't know about tomorrow. I don't need to know about tomorrow. I told my producer Chris this week that I'm so glad we get to put this kind of conversation out for people to hear, because there's so much a person can learn from people like Riyaz. I'm consistently blown away by the way our guests open up and share themselves. And I hope that others who are hearing this will gain as much from listening as I did from participating. Next week, I'll do a little more reflection on this excellent conversation. Until then, thank you, Riyaz, for everything you brought to this conversation and everything you bring to each day. If you enjoy the Dying to Tell You podcast and believe in our mission to demystify death and dying and to help people live more thoughtful and intentional lives, you can join us in that mission by helping to spread the word. Leave us a good review on whatever platform you listen to this podcast on, and consider subscribing. Follow us on social media, all of which can be found on our website, DTTYpodcast.com. And thirdly, word of mouth is one of the most powerful ways of spreading the message. Tell 2 or 3 people that you love about this podcast, and thank you for considering joining us on this mission. As always, if you or a loved one is living with a life-limiting illness and would be willing to share your story, please contact us on our website, DTTYpodcast.com, and click the Share Your Story link. This is Dying to Tell You.